Welcome to Speaking of Spirits. Tonight we're going to talk about adventures in paranormal investigations and the different kinds of haunts. Do you have a demon, or is it just Uncle Bill coming back to say hi? First of all, what would you consider a normal haunt? A normal investigation, a normal activity?
Is it normal, period?
Yes, any type of activity normal.
I guess when you've been in this field as long as we have, it's normal.
I'll tell you, I think the most common pattern that I have run across is you will have a person who has the ability to communicate with spirit. And at some point in their life has turned it off for whatever reason. And usually what happens is as they move through life, at a certain point, somebody very close to them passes away. It could be a close friend, it could be a family member, somebody who is fairly close to them. And then what happens is that person that passed away comes back and wants to say something, wants to get a message across, and is trying to talk to them. And of course, the person who has the ability is not picking up on it. And then the person who passed away starts getting frustrated because they've got something they need to say. So they start getting more and more aggressive in trying to communicate. This is when they can reach out and start moving things. This is when they can reach out and touch people. Because the person who passed away is getting angry. They're like, hey, you used to talk to me all the time. I've got something really important to say right now. Why are you ignoring me? And so they amp up the ability to try to communicate. This is when they really start getting a little more aggressive, trying to communicate. And then the person who, is still living, the person who has the abilities that has blocked them, they're not listening. And then all of a sudden they just know that now they're being touched, they're being watched, they're hearing voices they can't quite understand. Things are moving around their house. And then I get a call that's like, oh, I got a demon. It's like, no, you don't have a demon.
Right.
You just have somebody trying to communicate. And so there's a lot of different things in that. And if I've seen one pattern over and over again, that is probably the one that comes up by far the most.
Yeah, I agree. I think 24 years now. I was trying to count the other day, but I think it's 24 years that I've really aggressively been doing this. Not just taking a tape recorder into a cemetery as a kid, but really, really trying to research this and see what I find. Almost exclusively, the haunt is a relative, or someone ends up opening some kind of channel with their abilities that they don't even know they've opened. Maybe a stressful event or something like that, where they've learned to meditate. Anything like that can open a channel, and all of a sudden the dead are showing up to them.
Yes.
So it's one or the other. It's very rarely negative. It's usually, like you said, it's Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
He just comes back, or it may not even be associated. It's just a human who wants to come back. Now, humans are in death as they are in life, right? Yes. So if somebody's really, really grumpy, you're going to feel that. And you're going to feel that grumpiness and that aggressiveness and everything else that comes with it. But very rarely is it a negative situation.
So do you think that there's truth in some belief that the spirits are stronger right after they die.
Yes.
Do you think it's... Why do you think that is, I guess?
I think for me, what I believe, what I sense is that their consciousness is they're still alive in their head. Like they may not even know, or maybe they do know they've passed, but they're just so in the moment still that energy hasn't kind of dissipated. But yeah.
Everything's the way it was when they were alive.
Yeah. But then, it's kind of interesting. My mom had a lot of gifts. And one night I will go in ad nauseum as to what they were because she was incredible. But we had made a deal with each other. Whoever passes first, come back and let us know. You're okay? How's it going? That kind of thing. It took her 6 months to come to me.
Oh, yeah?
Almost to the day, 6 months.
Wow.
From her death. And she only came on the one day, and she only appeared to me once, her perfume, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And she's never been back. Now, she believed strongly in reincarnation. So somewhere out there, my mom is 15 years old. My dad, he passed February 14th last year, and it was 2 nights later.
Yeah.
And he didn't stop for like a week. I mean, he disrupted, the animals were a little upset. And he was really disruptive until I started talking to him. Like I was listening to him and I could hear what was going on. But I finally said, "Hey, Dad, I'm here. I know you're here now. It's okay. I'm here. You're here. Everything's great. We're fine. Everybody's fine. Your cat is fine. Everything's fine." And then he calmed down, and he only comes back now every once in a while. But my mother never came back after that once. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's similar to my mom's story. My grandma lived in Southern California, and she passed away, and she went to go help my grandpa with everything that was happening down there. And she was sleeping on the couch, and she said that she just woke up. And they had like the shutter windows, and they usually shuttered them all, but one of the shutters was open for some reason. And she looked over, and she saw her mom, and her mom smiled, and that was like the trademark grandma smile. And she walked down the path, and she said that that brought a lot of closure to her, and probably to her mom. And that's kind of the last of grandma that we hear of anyway. But it seems like a lot of the stories, things that I heard when I was at the funeral home, things I saw, it was that first 3 days. After the first 3 days, it kind of got less buzzy, but the first 3 days after, it was something for this young gun.
And I think a lot of times, though, what I've run across is that the people who've passed away usually are just trying to communicate something.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's, "I'm fine."
I'm fine.
Yeah, or a goodbye.
It's all good.
Yes. Yeah, or goodbye.
Or goodbye, yes.
I'm still watching over you. Kind of the comfort. I want to bring you comfort. I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think there's also that. I've also kind of, throughout a lot of the research I've done, kind of come to the conclusion, I've heard from a couple different places, that there is a period of time, what we consider a few days in our sense of time, where when somebody passes, they can still stay here and still cross over. But it's like if they stay here past that time is when they tend to get stuck.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of a window there where their energy can still stay around this level. Then they can still cross over.
Do you think that some spirits have the ability to cross back and forth between the two planes constantly?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think I totally believe it can be done. It's something that people have to practice, get used to. I think it's something that a lot of people don't think is possible, so they don't work on it. But it's something then that can be done.
You investigated the memorial building, right, with us?
Yes.
Yes.
I did.
So that one, I think we did it 3 times. the spirits in the building, that's the memorial building here in Pocatello, have said there's 87 spirits in that building all the time. And that makes sense because there's so much memorabilia in there and weapons and uniform components and things that the veterans are. So, in talking with them on the last investigation, it was one of the builders of the memorial building. He was very present during that investigation. He came through a lot. And I said, can you come and go? Can you go see your family? Because they've all passed. And he very strongly said yes. But he didn't want to go there. He wanted to stay in his building. So it was like, okay, typical guys hanging out in the garage. He doesn't want to hang out in the house. You know what I mean? So it was like he could freely come and go. And some of the spirits we've talked to through the years have said, yeah, I can go wherever I want. But they choose to be in that location. Some are stuck. Some choose to be there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times with children's spirits, we see a nanny type lady will associate herself with them who's not even a relative. Mm-hmm. She's just there to protect those children. And so it's kind of interesting, as most adults would. If you see children stranded somewhere, you're going to go help them. Yes. So it's kind of interesting that still takes place on the other side.
You see a lot of that. That theory comes through in a lot of different areas, and that's why certain locations tend to be, quote, haunted more than others. You'll see it a lot with farms, lighthouses, theaters, both movie theaters, live stage theaters, schools, libraries. These are locations where people literally put their entire heart and soul into doing what they did. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a lot of times not only their source of income, but how they identified themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, how they got a lot of their self-identity. So, you'll see that with school teachers. They will stay in a school. Mm-hmm. You know, doctors and nurses will stay in a hospital. Lighthouse keepers will stay in a lighthouse.
Ships.
Yeah.
Lots of ships.
Lots of ships, because a lot of sailors, a lot of captains will stay with the ship.
Yeah.
You know, because that's who they are. That's where they choose to be.
There's a very well-known airplane that it's in Central California. I think it's at Lemoore, but I could be wrong. Naval Air Station. I could be wrong on that one. But it's a static display, which is an aircraft that is no longer flying. Mm-hmm. It cannot fly, so it's considered a static display for people to go walk up to, right? Mm-hmm. And it has no electronics in it. Yet the radio comes on, and all the lights come on. There's no electronics in it. The caretaker for the static displays has been in there several times when all of a sudden World War II radio chatters going on. And he feels the plane shudder like it's dropping bombs. I mean, it's just, he said it's the most fascinating thing, and a lot of people have gone down there. My dad was one of them because he was a pilot, and he went down there and he sat in that airplane, and he said it was completely alive. He said, if I didn't know better, I could take off right now in that aircraft. But there was nothing electronical in that plane anymore. It was stripped. So where did the lights come from? And why did the instruments light up? Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating. And people have seen it when they drive by the static display. They'll see the lights on, the landing gear, the lights come on. I mean, there's no lights left.
There's no batteries.
There's nothing left. Yeah. It's fascinating. And I was on one of the ships that I think that I found the most fascinating was the one in Corpus Christi. I think they call her the Gray Ghost. Mm-hmm. And she's docked down there. What was she? I think she was an aircraft carrier. She was an aircraft carrier, I think. Lady Lexington, maybe? Mm-hmm. Okay. And she's a smaller one. But they filmed Pearl Harbor there, the second Pearl Harbor, where they used that ship. And wow, you go through that thing. It was crazy haunted. And then I read some of the things that the crew said during filming of the movie, the stuff that was going on in there. Like people walking through scenes, but that person didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And stuff like that was going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sailors' uniforms haven't changed that much through the years, so pretty interesting.
My wife and I have gone down to San Diego a few times, and they have a bunch of, well, everything.
Yes.
But the Star of India
Yeah.
is the one I'm always drawn to.
Yes.
And
Very haunted.
every time we've gone,
Beautiful ship.
it's awesome.
Yes, it is.
The story and the little pieces of what they found during the restorations, it's really cool. If you haven't gone, go. And it was cold in San Diego. It was like 62 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh, yeah.
You need your down coat for that.
It's real cold. And it was fantastic because there was nobody around.
Right.
And so it was probably my wife and I and maybe 6 other people on the ship.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. And we were in the bottom, and I was looking at a piece of bone that had been turned into a game. I can't remember the game. And I was looking at it, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye. And I looked, and of course I didn't see anything else. And so I looked back, and then I saw the movement in the corner of my eye. And so, you know how you try to get your peripheral just to see?
Try to stretch your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't always work.
And I was there, and it looked to me like a sailor doing a dance.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was, and I looked, and of course I didn't see anything again. And a couple of the slides down, it was kind of explaining some of the things that they would do on their off time, and one of it was a particular dance. And it seemed, in my mind's eye, to be that same thing.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
That is a wonderful ship. Yeah, absolutely go there. If you're in San Diego, if you're going to San Diego, make the trip to the Star of India.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yes.
And so kind of circling back, it left me feeling positive, and I was kind of happy, and I thought that was a really cool experience for me. And going back to the theater things and stuff, I wonder if that's not a big buildup for people because they have that emotional feeling, whether it be tied or they want to share it or they get energy from it. Whatever it is, don't know.
I think a lot of the people that call us and they ask for help, they want confirmation that they're not crazy. That's number one. Am I
That's the biggest
absolutely
thing I
nuts
want,
here? Because, and number two, don't tell anybody you're coming over. That's fine. We can do that. But it's, am I nuts or what's happening to me? Why am I experiencing this now and I've never done it before? So again, they've changed something in their life or they've become more open somehow, whatever it may be. Now, a lot of people say, oh, the Ouija board is, it's all bad. It's a tool of communication like anything else. It's just a tool. Somehow somebody's used something, done something, said something to make them become more open. And now spirits are coming to them. So sometimes we do get those investigations that the minute we get there, it's not Uncle Bill.
True. Yeah, sometimes you get there and it's like, oh, this is not a friendly.
Yeah, and we knew that the minute we got onto that property. Remember, it took us a minute to find it, and it was right there in front of us, but we kept driving by it, but we all had the willies.
We were actually caravanning out there, and we drove by it like 3 times.
Right.
We had a hard time finding the place the first time, and the directions they gave us were great. The address was right.
Everything was right.
We
Finding
just
it?
went shot right past it. Yeah.
And what's really interesting is years later, I ended up driving down that driveway again, like last year, and I didn't even remember until I saw the willow tree, and I started backing up. I'm like, we're not, and it was because I was looking for a different house for something completely off subject, but I'm like, oh, there's that tree, and the friend that was with me, I started backpedaling pretty quickly. She goes, what's wrong? I said, we're not going down this driveway.
This is what we call a tactical retreat.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I am not going down there unarmed. And when I say unarmed, I mean armed spiritually. Yeah. So how, for you, Mark, how was it that you knew immediately that this was not an ordinary haunt?
When we first got there was just so much going on. And throughout the entire night, that was the first thing for me, is there was just so much activity. Nothing really settled in. It was like, oh, we'd go look at over here at this, and then okay, let's go look at this. Oh, there's this over here, and everything. When you got out and when you started looking around the property, like I said, there's this huge willow tree out front, and the branches of the willow tree had been tied in knots, and this was intentionally tied. There was no way that could have naturally happened, but they were also tied to where the branches were. Geez, I don't know, 15, 20 feet in the air now. There's no way you could have gotten up there to tie those. Well, I mean, you probably, if you had scaffolding and stuff, but still, it would have been an evolution.
So, right, it's
no point to do it.
Somebody tied it years ago.
Yeah, the point is it happened years ago, and the tree kept growing. But the tree had, and then just walking around the property, there was
an uneasiness the minute I got out of the car, and not too many places. I mean, I grew up in the forest. I grew up backpacking by myself in desolation wilderness. I've done all this stuff. I've never felt uneasy. I mean, okay, with the grizzly, okay. That would make me a little uneasy. But I'm saying, being outside, being in the woods, doing all this stuff, I'm comfortable in those surroundings. That's where I've spent all my life. But I got out of the car there, and I had the heebie-jeebies. And I'm trying to, I'm okay with this. This is great. But it wasn't good. From the moment even before, it's like I didn't want to get out of the car. It was bananas. This place was bananas.
So isn't there a significance to the knot in the willow tree?
There is, but I tried to research that and find that out, and I couldn't find anything on it.
Oh, really?
In the Celtic lore, it is to ward off evil.
Oh.
Because the willow is used in different like witchcraft and druidism and a lot of different things. The willow is used to water a witch with the willow branches. Mm-hmm. The willow is a conductor. So the willow you knotted the willow tree to ward off the evil spirits. And
I did run across some interesting things. The willow tree itself, just having a tree, is usually a positive thing, designed to ward off negative energy. And as a total side note, there was a belief then that if you touch the willow tree, it would also chase off negative energy, which is where we got the phrase now, knock on wood, where that comes from. You would tap the willow tree to chase off any negative energy.
I'll be sure to knock on my daughter.
Yeah.
She'll love that.
But I could not find anything about why the branches were knotted.
Yeah.
A lot of cultures have used the willow tree for medicinal
the bark
properties.
Everything.
The bark's being used.
Yep.
It's considered to be almost magical tree in a positive way.
Right. It's very positive.
Yeah. The inside of it could be hollow, and at one time it was believed that was kind of a portal for the Celtics. For the little people, for the fairies, for.
And speaking of that,
come in and out, yeah. So.
During this investigation, and I'm pretty sure this investigation is still on Pocatello Paranormal's YouTube page. I'll have to go back and look. I'm pretty sure it's still there. I don't think I've ever taken it off. We got a ferry. Mm-hmm. We got a ferry in the back bit.
We had just about the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
Of the paranormal world on this investigation.
So what was quite interesting is that I think the property itself in this location had some really negative things that might have happened there over the years. But the family that lived in this house had very unique gifts. And when they would fight, they would start fires.
Oh.
And there were ovens and microwaves and different appliances in the backyard that weren't gas, right? That had all caught on fire when they'd have a big blow up in the house.
Wow.
Like fire coming out of the knobs of an electric oven. And different, yes. So when this family would get all stressed out and Man. But there was something, I think, attached to the family, very much so, that we did not have the ability to remove. Yeah. I think this attachment was ancient.
Very old.
And, you know, like I tell people all the time, we can come in and we can do the investigation and we can give you our idea of what we believe is going on. Nobody in this field is an expert. It's not a proven science. That's why you know, we can't duplicate things and have it come out exact time after time after time. And so I'm trying to tell people this when we come in the door, that we're going to tell you what we believe is happening. We may be right, we may be wrong. I think we're usually on the right track, you know, because I don't want to mislead anybody. But in this instance, I was very clear. We cannot make this thing move. We can't make this thing leave your house. I think that the combination of abilities between these family members, and there was a lot of people that lived in this house, and they all had abilities, drew this thing in, and it fed on their abilities. Because when they came together, it was like kerosene and a match. I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. I've never seen pyrokinesis. Yeah. Not real. I've read about it. I've never seen it until that family.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a family and generations, and everybody had abilities, and nobody wanted to admit they had abilities.
Yeah.
And so, kind of what we were talking about earlier is that it's like, well, even if we came in and cleared out everything here, in 2 weeks you're going to have something else. Because all of you have abilities, and when you have the ability to communicate, you, on the spiritual level, you are like a lighthouse. You're constantly broadcasting this. And so entities, you know, people that have passed over, if they have a message, if they're trying to get something across, they know you can hear them. And so they come to you to try to communicate. And this family just had this incredible range of abilities. So they were just drawing in all kinds of things. Yeah. And it was like, wow. And then not only that, but then I agree with Colleen, I think something really bad happened on that specific location. There was, I think, also something that was on the land that was a watcher or a protector for that section of land. And this particular property was right up against the reservation. You know, and so there was all kinds of...
And the river.
Yeah, it was right next to the river. So it was just like this perfect storm of all kinds of things that came together in one spot.
You had the family was a conductor. You have the waters that's a conductor. You have probably an imprint of whatever happened there that's lingering, and they all fed on each other. Yeah. And so during the investigation, we were, I think, in the little girl's room in the back of the house, and the windows were open because it was hot. And so when we're reviewing investigations in the summertime particularly, we see like an orb. I slow it way down and I look for wings, because if I slow it way, way down, insects are very clear. So because there's wing movement, you can see the wings, right? And so they kept saying that they would get orbs in the little girl's room, right? And we caught, it's an elemental. I mean, what we would call a fairy. It was so clear. I slowed that sucker down and slowed it down and slowed it down and slowed it down. And it is not an insect. It is a movement of light. I swear, it's fascinating to me. But then we started hearing the knocking on the trees. That, like, my hair stood up on the back of my neck when that was going on. It sounded like somebody took a baseball bat to a trunk of a tree and was just whacking the hell out of it. Yeah. Whack! And I mean, it was just like whack, and it would reverberate, and then whack, reverberate. And we were all going, what the hell? And no one was out there. You guys went out there, right? I'm like, I ain't going out there. And I'm like, I'm not fearless in the woods, but I'm like, Mark, you go. You're a big guy. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
That kind of started the weirdness.
They did, because it was, I mean, and it did. It had some echo to it. So, I mean,
It was loud and close.
You went out there and there was nothing. We could see nothing on the property. Front yard, backyard,
there
side
wasn't
yard.
anybody out there playing a trick on us. There was only the two family members there with us, I think.
Yes.
On the first investigation.
Yeah, there was 2 family members. The residents of the house is that the 2 family members, they had children, and then grandma lived with them also.
Right.
So those were the residents of the house, and grandma and the children were gone. Well, grandma came back for a little bit. I remember seeing her, but the children were off staying the night somewhere.
Yeah, we typically don't want children during an investigation.
It's best to have the kids somewhere else during an investigation. So, but that's the family members, and most of it was just the 2.
Yeah.
The mom and dad. Yeah.
So we had objects being moved on us on our camera. We had growling.
Mm-hmm.
We had... So this thing that was in their house, this attachment, would mimic a child.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people out there that have spent a lot of time listening to paranormal stuff, investigating, whatever, anything that mimics, that's bad juju.
That's generally not friendly.
That's usually not a friendly thing.
Yeah.
Mimicking a partner's voice or mimicking a child's voice. Trying to lure you in to be comfortable and let your guard down. That is not a good thing. This is the very first time in all these years that I've done this, and even with my mom when I wasn't really doing it, but she was doing it and I'm tagging along. Never seen it. Never seen the mimic. I've heard about it. I've read about it. I've studied it. My mom warned me this would happen. She said, you will run across this. She probably never took me on anything really negative that she dealt with, you know. Yeah. But, wow. This thing was strong.
I also think because it would use the mimic to create tension in the family. Because, like I said, when this family started getting after each other, the energy that created, I think, just fed so many things.
Do you think it's looking for a particular energy or just causing havoc?
No, I'm just now starting to realize the connection between a lot of this stuff and a person's emotional state. Mm-hmm. And an emotional state creates a much larger energy field around that. If you've ever studied electricity, there's an electromagnetic field. It's a field that is around the electrical cord. You can measure it with the thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to think humanoids have that same thing. We've got this energy field around us.
Well, think of how people read auras.
Yeah.
Right? You can see the glow. And when I'm really tuned into somebody, I can see their aura.
Yeah. And so we've got this energy field around us. And when we're highly emotional, that energy field expands. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of different entities will take this, for lack of a better term, to feed off of. This is where they get their energy.
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with humanoids, the easiest emotion to create is fear.
Yeah.
Fear and anger are very easy to create. So a lot of entities will create those emotions because it increases the energy field of the human, and then that's where they get their energy from.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what was happening here, is that these people, this mimicking entity would mimic and would do it in a way that would get them fussing with each other.
Yeah.
And as that energy built up, as that emotion built up, whatever was mimicking probably used that to feed itself. Yeah. And I think that energy between this particular couple, they probably got along great, but I think in this particular case, when they really got after each other, it created a massive energy field.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of things were coming in to take energy off of it.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about this particular case was that this thing, this entity, followed them. So when they would travel, it went with.
Oh. So you couldn't escape it.
No, because they would call me from other states and say, it's here. It's here with us right now. And it would never leave them. And, so we had given them direction on talking to some other people that we knew that probably might be able to help them. And they did everything, and it won't leave them. And what a horrible thing to have to experience your whole life, because this thing feeds, and then it creates, and then it feeds, and then it creates. I mean, it's just the cycle of negativity constantly. And that's a horrible way to live.
Oh, yeah.
But again, we cannot ever tell anybody that we can go in there and we can get rid of this. We don't know if we can. Yeah. In many cases we can. We can help somebody cross over, or just alleviating fear. I've gone into so many houses where people are absolutely terrified. They're really terrified. And we have them work with us. And then they realize, I can do this. It's not a negative thing. Mm-hmm. But when it is negative, horrible to have to live that way.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
No.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can just go in there, and if we can just find out, get information.
Right.
And then we can tell them, you don't have a demon. This is just Uncle Bob. He's just come back to see you. And then tomorrow when something happens, they'll just say, hey, Uncle Bob, how you doing?
Yeah.
They don't get fearful anymore.
Right. Take out the fear.
So that fear is gone.
Right.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times that just really, really calms things down at that point. So.
Yeah. So you said during this particular investigation, you heard something.
I did. I was at one point. I'm standing in the living room talking with the father, with the resident, and we're just standing there talking. And I heard this very strange noise. It was outside the house, on the south side of the house. I remember that, and it was a really weird noise, something I'd never heard. And I looked at him and I was like, "Did you hear that?" And he says, "Oh yeah." He says, "Grandma." He referred to Grandma. Now I think Grandma knew things.
Yeah.
Right. He says, Grandma says that's just a pack of wild dogs. I'm like, I don't think that's a pack of wild dogs. I mean, I think Grandma's got the right key, but the wrong keyhole, because it was just a really weird sound. And at the time, I really had no reference point for it, other than to say this does not sound.
It's not dogs. It's not coyotes. It's not. Yeah.
So I kind of went through it, and it wasn't until probably a few months later, I was just messing around on the interwebs looking stuff up. And somebody claimed to have a recording of a werewolf. And I listened to that recording, and whatever they had recorded was exactly what I heard. So I don't know if it was a werewolf, but that was the exact sound that I heard.
Do you have that sound?
I don't have the specific one, but I have one very close here.
Okay. And
so this is actually off of YouTube. And I got to give credit here. It's a video titled, Is There a Werewolf in Scotland? And it's posted by, looks like Cater's Clips. So I just want to give proper, recognition to people here. But this is what it sounded like.
I remember that. It's giving me the heebie-jeebies just hearing this. I remember that.
And I heard that very clear outside the house.
So I sent you out there.
Yeah. Yeah, so send the demonologist outside. Yeah.
He's going to deal with this thing. I'm not going to.
But yeah, when I heard that, I was like, that does not sound like a pack of dogs to me.
No. No. And being around, I've heard wolves.
Yes.
And we had a half wolf growing up, and he would howl every night. That doesn't sound wolfish.
No, that does not sound like a wolf howl. Does not sound like a pack of dogs. It does not.
There was some guttural sounds in there too, in the middle of it.
Yeah, it range-wise went very guttural to fairly
really high.
So it was actually quite a range.
Yeah.
Vocal range to cover. But yeah, that was when I heard that recording, and again, this was not the recording, but it was almost identical to what I heard. I was like, wow, that is exactly what I heard.
Yeah. It's too bad as the years go by, our equipment gets better and better and better. Yeah. And, we didn't have the best equipment back then. But that house, that case, so we had another case pretty close to that house. And that had a negative being in it. Well, it had two. Mm-hmm. And then there was the case in American Falls. And when you plot them on a map, they're in a straight line. Mm-hmm. And I found that interesting.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they were in fairly straight line from where they were. And then we found out that there's a practitioner in American Falls of Santeria.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And I believe this person is still there and still practicing. Some of my contacts have told me, yes.
Okay.
And Santeria, for people who don't know, a lot of people think that voodoo is all negative. Well, voodoo is a religion, like any religion. It's a religion, but Santeria is a religion, but they have like the yin and the yang to it. They have the dark and the light, and they can practice light or dark or both. And this person apparently sends things out. And seems to be, could be, the person who directs. Go forth and prosper.
Some of this stuff, yeah.
And it could be. I don't know.
Yeah. I know that I spent a couple years in Texas and New Mexico, and that's a big deal down there. Mm-hmm. And I forget what they called the main lady. But it seems like they had a main lady.
Well, they have a high priestess.
High priestess in each town.
Mm-hmm. In Santeria, they had the Santeria down there.
Mm-hmm. A lot.
I ran into a lot of voodoo down in southeast Texas, and I have friends that practice voodoo, and the voodoo ceremonies that I've been to are very light and very beautiful and very powerful, and you feel really uplifted when you leave. But I also know that there's the bad part of it, the dark part of it, where they can send things out. And,
I was on the other part of Texas and East New Mexico. So it was closer to Mexico than anything.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting. So, when you have a haunt, you cannot base the experience of your haunt in your home on Ghost Adventures and The Exorcist and all of these things. Because, first off, Ghost Adventure makes up a lot of things. They do. Mm-hmm. And they sensationalize things that probably really are not negative. They make them negative. And, he gets possessed like in every episode.
They like that demon word, too.
Yeah, and come on, it's what I'm trying to get at, to reassure a lot of people that are listening who may say, I've heard those knocks and bumps in the night. 99.9% of the time, it's not negative. Mm-hmm. It's not demonic. It's not evil. It's a human who's trying to make contact with you. You may or may not know them, but they're human. Or even like your dog. When I put Earl to sleep, for about a week after that, when I put him down, I felt his pressure on my leg when he'd lean against me like Daisy does, my big hound dogs. Mm-hmm. And I would reach down to pet Earl, and I'm like, he's not there. I mean, so it doesn't have to be a human, but not very, very few haunts are negative. That's not to say there aren't negative haunts. Mm-hmm. And there are attachments, and things can happen to you, and you have to be really, really careful when you're, like I said, the Ouija board is a tool. It's a tool to communicate, but you have to be very careful who you invite through the door. Yeah. Because it may not be somebody you want. I mean, I don't want Ted Bundy in my house, okay? So I don't want to talk to him when I'm doing whatever work I'm doing that evening. So
You might have good insights on
well,
Volkswagens.
he was a snappy dresser. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, you have to be careful who you're talking to, who you invite, and then how you close that door afterwards. This summer, I almost hesitate to tell this story because it was local. I'm not going to use names, obviously.
Okay.
There was a person who passed away this summer I have never met in this area. I don't know this person. And something compelled me as soon as I read the article to go to this person's Facebook page. And after somebody had walked through my house, like this lady walked through my house, this dead person, like just for all of you out there. I've become more and more of a medium as time goes on, although I don't call myself a medium because I'm really not. But this chick just walked through my house one night, and I'm like, and it was the same day of this accident, because I heard about it. One of those Idaho State Journal things came up on my phone, and I read it, and I went, oh, well, that's terrible, And then this gal that evening walked through my house. She just like went in the front door and out the back. I just kind of watched her walk by. And I'm like, well, that was interesting. I wonder who that was. Mm-hmm. And then immediately I was compelled to go to this person, to go back and read the name in the article. And then try to find this person on Facebook. And I did. I went, oh my God, that was her. Now that's never happened to me because I'm not a medium. But I found out that when she died, she had her dog with her. And I run a group here locally in town that helps reunite people with missing pets. And a post went up about 2 days later that we just found out that this dog was missing. It was in this wreck with this woman. And we want to find the dog. And I went, and I was on it. It was immediately. We're trying to network, and we're trying to get this dog found because the dog was in the wreck. And this woman kept coming to my house every night. I'm like, I can't. What do you want? I'm trying to do every tool that I have to my ability to communicate, and she's just not talking to me. But she is so emotional. I even called our mutual friend and said, "Have you heard of this person?" And she goes, "No." What do you think she wants? I said, I don't know. I didn't put it together. As soon as we found the dog, she was gone. Mm-hmm. She knew somehow that I ran that group, and she came right to me. My dog is missing. I didn't put it together. All those pieces didn't connect until the minute we found the dog, and she left. And she was gone. Like, instantly gone. She was at peace. Mm-hmm. Her dog was okay. Yeah. Interesting, though, huh?
She was concerned about her dog.
She was concerned about her dog. She knew I ran the group because it's a pretty big group here in town. Mm-hmm. And she's like, help me.
See, now it's also, especially more in the summertime, but I'll get people just cruising through my place all the time.
Yeah.
And my back door is a sliding glass door that's on a patio. Mm-hmm. But I'll still have things just cruise from the front to the back, just go right through the house.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So, Mr. Demonologist.
Yes.
Now that we've scared everybody, is it just recognizing that as Uncle Bill? And if you associate that and give Uncle Bill knowledge, or not knowledge, give Uncle Bill recognition,
will he go away?
Will he go away? If people want them to go away?
Sometimes. Yes and no. It kind of depends. But basically, the biggest thing is if you can identify it as Uncle Bill or whoever and give it some type of an identity, especially if you can give it a name, you've taken away 90% of the fear.
Yeah. So
the people dealing with it are at least in a place now that they can deal with it. And that helps tremendously. If it is Uncle Bill, again, or somebody, a family member or a close friend or somebody to communicate, then just, there's a lot of different ways that you can just sit down and listen to what they have to say. Yeah. Just get really quiet and say, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And it comes to different people, different ways. For me, I'll get a thought. Yeah. And have a notebook with you if you need to, whatever, write it down. And a lot of times that solves it because a lot of times they're just trying to communicate. Excuse me.
So my dad, having been married to my mom and knew what kind of freak she was, would always say he didn't believe it. Although, and again, this is going to be a whole episode one night, just her. But, and how many times she saved his bacon because he was a test pilot. So, he lived, so we lived up in the Northern California, up in the forest, close to Tahoe, and a lot of gold mining up there. It's called the Mother Lode, gold country. And he was clearing some part of his land. He lived on a pretty steep area in Georgetown, California, very mountainous, densely wooded. And he was clearing a spot so that they could see Mount Lassen, the volcano, because they had a direct shot. And so he dropped some trees so they could see it. And as he was doing all this clearing, he started finding all these little artifacts, like little hinges and stuff, but they were really old, almost worn thin from, just rust and everything. And he started finding more and more things. And so my dad was also an artist. So he took his sketch pad down there one day and he sat on a tree stump and he started doing automatic writing. Now, for the listeners out there, if you've never done it, automatic writing is like Mark's saying, however this message comes to you, you just kind of let your mind go and not think about anything and just let your hand move on the paper if it wants to move. Well, he came up with a name. Never heard the name before, and I have this sketch still in my dad's stuff. He came up with the name of a gentleman. And then, so he went down to the assay office because there's still mining claims all over up there. And they chased down a mining claim on that piece of property.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Really
So he built a cabin, a little replica cabin, like a miner's cabin, right there on that clearing. That became a place for him to hide out and drink beer. But, he built this groovy little cabin. And in the little cabin, he had these metal buckets full of all these little trinkets that they would find. And, yeah, I thought it was really cool. And he has the little miner's name above the cabin there.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I only met your dad a couple times, and we were at that one investigation. And I know once or twice something happened in the investigation, and he got a little smile.
Yeah.
So, I think he was...
He became more and more in tune and more interested the older he got and the closer to the end he got. He had cancer, and he knew his time was short. And because he was quizzing me a lot right before he passed away about, are you sure there's another place we're going, right? And I'm like, Dad, you went on an investigation with us. You saw us communicate. He goes, it's kind of like he wanted to believe, but wasn't quite there yet. And I said, Dad, you'll find a way to come back. And boy, did he. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
That's awesome.
That's something I've been fascinated by for years, because depending on, who people are in their history, it's kind of funny because you talk to like a lot of police officers. I don't believe any of it. We got to have facts. Okay? But then you'll talk to them, you sit there and listen to them, and it's just like, well, I was going into this one place and it didn't feel right. What do you mean it didn't feel right? I used my gut instincts. Oh, yeah, but you don't believe any of this, do you? It's the same thing, only different.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because both my dad and my mom were cops.
Yeah. So it's,
so,
and a lot of the same thing. Your dad was also a pilot.
Right.
Pilots tend to be very factual. This is what we got to be. But at the same time,
they're using their other senses.
They've got instincts.
They know.
They've got senses.
Right.
There's something going on beyond just...
And it's fascinating with him, because he was a search and rescue pilot. So for years, 22 years. And so right after the Korean War, the Civil Air Patrol is an offshoot. It's under the umbrella of the Air Force, but it's civilians, but they have the same ranking, and it's under that umbrella of the Air Force. And so right after World War II and Korea wars, we had literally hundreds of thousands of private pilots, way more than we do now, because they could buy a Navy Corsair for $500, which back then was a lot of money, but still $500.
Yeah.
Now it's $250,000 for a beautiful Corsair. You know what I'm saying? So he worked up as a lieutenant colonel. When he got out of the Air Force, he was Civil Air Patrol, and he was a lieutenant colonel, and he flew a lot, just thousands of search and rescue missions. And that's how we ended up moving to Lake Tahoe area, was because that was the corridor he flew all the time to find all these downed airplanes. And his oh gosh, what do you call him? It's like the Rio, but his visual. So my dad's the pilot. He's got the other guy who's looking, but my dad's the pilot, right? And this gentleman would say all the time, and I have this all written down because they wrote all this stuff down. They made a book. They just never published it, and I want to get it published. But they said, we don't know how your dad would find these airplanes, because we'd be flying, and all of a sudden he just turned left on this canyon completely. That's not what they were supposed to do. But he's down here, down, and they turn, and there's the plane. Or they'd hit just horrible weather, and they're like, shit, we don't even know if we're going to make it back. My dad's like, don't worry about it. We're fine. We got this. And he'd slip that plane in, and I mean, it was just amazing. It was amazing. And I truly believe that there was guides, something guiding him all the time through all of this stuff. I mean, for the hairy things that he did in war and everything else. And yeah.
I saw it with my grandpa. He was a tail gunner in a B-52 all through Korea, and then he retired out of the Air Force. And he got all kinds of certifications in the Air Force, and then he trained American airline engineers back when they needed an engineer for the plane. And once the computer took over for the engineer, he took more tests so he could train the pilots how to fly. So it's kind of a brief history of my grandpa. He came to live with us the last year and a half of his life. And when he had dementia, and it was just kind of messy near the end. But when he first came, we went to Hill Air Force Base. And my grandpa is exactly the guy you were explaining with the cops. I need facts. Let's go over there. Exactly. And we went, and even with his dementia, he was just spouting off stuff, because that was Grandpa. And the Hill Air Force Base is really cool too. Mm-hmm. They have an SR-71 Blackbird, and he said that he had seen one of those in the late 60s and how he couldn't say anything, and to see it in the hangar was a really cool experience for him. And then so they have a B-52 there too. And so I think my mom told some of the people that my grandpa was a tail gunner in a B-52 for 25 years or whatever it was. And so they gave him a special tour, and he was able to go inside the B-52. And the reason I tell you this whole story is when he went in, he said, "Do you feel her?" And to have the factual guy there and say that, you're like, yes, Grandpa.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I do believe that. So a lot of these people that come to our houses that haunt us, if it's not directly for a message, like this lady that came to me this summer because she was worried about her dog, it's the people in your life you were close to that are here they guide you or protect you or give you that thought, oh, turn left down that canyon. That's where it is. I mean, they have the knowledge, and they're trying so hard to feed us, and we don't listen. There's so much noise, electronics and TV and cell phone and noise and work and stress and family. We don't listen.
So that was going to be my follow-up question. Should we want Uncle Bill to leave?
That kind of comes down to the family and Uncle Bill particular situation. A lot of times, as soon as they get their message across, they just cross over. They're done. That's all they needed.
Yeah.
A lot of times you just got to explain to them, hey, you can stay here, but you got to stop disturbing people.
Mm.
Yeah.
And a lot of times everybody is fine with that. A lot of times you can tell the family that's living in the house and say, well, this is what we get. This is what we think it is. And they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, Uncle Bill can stay. We know Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
That's fine. So it's kind of on both sides.
Yeah.
Sometimes they stay, sometimes they go, sometimes, it just kind of depends on what the situation is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know that it's okay to claim your space. It's your house. you would not let a stranger through your front door. I mean, most of us wouldn't.
Yeah.
Just say, come on in. We don't know you. What do you want? I mean, I'll come at the door with my shotgun. What do you want? I'm that kind of person. You know what I'm saying? So you don't just let somebody in off the street that you don't know. If somebody comes into your house, take it back. Yeah. If you don't want them there, tell them to leave. Now, realize there are some things you can't make leave, like we talked about, that negative thing. And there are attachments that can happen. It's rare, but they can happen. And the children, the entities that are children, they will usually attach themselves to a family with children. And usually there's a nanny that will come with them. And so you might end up with a whole bunch of people. But the children is very difficult. And on a cleansing, when I don't do cleansings for people anymore, because I am not comfortable telling a child to leave in the dark when they don't know where to go. I'm okay with telling, Betty, hey, Betty, take a hike, but not a child. And I can't do that. To me, it's just like, I want them to come home with me. Just come on, Billy, come home with me. You can live in my house. I just have a hard time with that. So I don't do cleansings for people anymore. I can tell people how to cleanse their own home, but I won't do it. And I have friends that will, if I call on them to help somebody out. But I don't know. So one of the guidance I could give somebody who's listening now, who says, maybe I should cleanse my house, and maybe I'm not doing it right. There's no right or wrong way to do it. There are some tools of the trade. You can use sage and sweetgrass, things like that. You can buy it at local, like, enchantments and different places online to cleanse your house. If you have something that you really want out, and you really, 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 really want it to go away, and you cleanse from top to bottom, and you tell it in no uncertain terms in every single room, you get the hell out of my house, salt your doors when you're done. On the outside of your door, lay a line of salt. Salt has been used for centuries as a barrier to keep something to come across it. When I cleanse my own home, and I don't do it very regularly, it's only when I feel I need to, I allow anybody who's good to stay, party on with me, and anybody who's not nice, they have to leave. And I mean, it works for me. It just works for me. So find whatever method that makes you comfortable if you feel like you have to cleanse, but realize cleansing once is not going to do it. I do know somebody who cleansed her house. She is a medium. She bought a property in Old Town, not Old Town, but by the university, and it took her over a year of every single day cleansing to quiet her house. Every single day for a year. She was dedicated. She wanted the shit out because she couldn't handle the noise. It was so noisy in the house that she bought a very old home, and just realize it's not. This isn't going to be easy.
There's two things that I would add to that. First of all, is that when we do start working with somebody, if you do have abilities to communicate with spirits, then if you have the ability, the first thing you need to do is set boundaries. And that's the first thing we teach people. And yes, you can set boundaries. You can say, no, don't come to me while I'm sleeping. I need my sleep. Do not bother my children. You can set very hard boundaries. And again, you need to say this like you're talking to your children. You don't be wishy-washy with it. You're like, no, you do this, you do that. You cannot come while I'm sleeping. You cannot bother my children. You can't, and you say it like you mean it. But then again, we also say, set aside a quiet time, and then you can tell them, hey, tomorrow afternoon, I will be here. You can come and talk to me then.
Right.
And then you can, like I said, have a notebook, whatever works for you, get your thoughts,
right,
whatever, and allow them to say what they need to say and move on. So, very first thing is set your boundaries. And you can do that.
Yes.
You can set your boundaries. And the second thing I'd say is that I have never ran across a situation where there is only one entity. And a lot of times you can there might be a darker type energy. And remember, that just might be a former human who was angry.
Right.
But there might be 2 or 3 other entities in the place too.
Right.
You know, and the other 2 are perfectly fine. They've got nothing. But a lot of times people will think there's one entity there and all of the activity is on that one entity. And I have almost never seen just one entity. There's always multiple entities. Again, that's not something to be afraid of, just something to be aware of.
Right.
And one of my favorite stories about that, I was talking to a woman who years and years ago was in her bed. She was getting ready to go to sleep, and there was a very, very dark mass forming up in the corner towards the ceiling of her bedroom. And while she was watching this dark mass, she heard a very deep growl right next to her bed. And it scared her, and she associated it with being the same entity. And when I started talking to her, I said, well, I'm going to propose an idea here. And again, I may or may not be right. But I'm going to say you probably have, and this woman was very good with dogs. She had a lot of canine energy. I said, you probably have a protector that is a canine. And I said, when that entity started forming in the corner of your house, up in the thing, your protector next to you went into protection mode. And that was the growl you heard. The growl was not the entity up in the corner. The growl was your protector going into protection mode.
Yeah.
And that's also quite possible. We do have entities that are protectors.
Yeah, whether...
And when something negative shows up, they go into protection mode.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, well, whether you're a Christian or not, or Catholic, or Mormon, or a Wiccan, whatever it is, there's those entities that guide and protect us. You can call them angels, you can call them whatever you want. You know, whatever your faith calls them, whatever you believe in, they're there. They're there.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be animals, you know.
I think mine have to have a rotation.
Well, I think that's why all my animals are the kind of doofy ones, because my protectors are pretty doofy. You know what I'm saying? Somebody told me once, because I have just absolute, just a plethora of kind of not very intellectual animals that hang around my property, and they said, well, you know, you get what you are, you know. I'm like, well, there you go. So I think that I have, like, Goofy is one of my protectors. So I just think that, but just remember that just because something's in your house, it's not negative. Mm-hmm. I mean, Mark is the demonologist. This is what he does. This is what he's skilled in. And how many times have you run across something that you would truly call a demon?
Never on an investigation.
Right. Negative, yes.
Now, again...
Non-human, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But demonic, no.
No. And I will throw this out there, too. Whenever anybody calls me, I ask them a series of questions. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm trying, first of all, to get people to start thinking about it in a specific way.
Right.
And so somebody will call and say, well, I've got a dark energy. And I says, okay, well, explain dark. Is it angry? Is it sad? Is it depressed?
Right.
Is it,
right.
You know, what type of, because dark covers a wide spectrum.
Right.
What kind of dark are we dealing with? And I'm not trying to be a jerk. Like I said, I'm trying to get people to take a step back and think.
Yeah.
What are we dealing with? What do I have going on? You know, how can I analyze this? It's very possible you can have another thing that's fairly common is if somebody has committed suicide. They just about always want to come back with a message. Mm-hmm. But they still got that depression with them. They still got that sadness that they had. Well, that's a negative energy. Right. And if you're not used to it, and again, if they know, if you have the ability to communicate, you are a lighthouse broadcasting.
Right.
And they will see your light. And maybe somebody you don't know, but they will come to you because they've got something they need to say. And so it's not angry, but it's very, very sad. Mm-hmm. It's very heavy depression. So to take a step back and identify the darkness, what kind of negative?
And realize that they can feed you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have dark entity, right? Depression, angry, sad. Mm-hmm. You will very soon start mimicking those emotions. So that's very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So if all of a sudden you've lapsed into some form of depression or anger and you don't know where it's coming from. It's not medication. You haven't been recently diagnosed with something. You haven't had something traumatic happen to you, whatever. And this is just hitting you from out of the blue. Well, do you also have a haunt? Because that emotion, you will feel that emotion, and an empath, which most people are empathic. Mm-hmm. Most people have a level of that ability, whether or not they recognize it. I mean, a true empath is at a different level, but that empathic trait in all of us to feel the pain of somebody else or feel the depression of somebody else, that's there. And if all of a sudden you're feeling that, you have to wonder, and you don't have any medical explanation for it or a family event, you've mm-hmm. just somebody who's just passed or something and you're feeling the grief, but then, and you also have unexplained things going on in your house, then it's very possible you're picking up on the agitation, frustration, depression, whatever, of the entity that's in your house or entities.
Yeah, and it's very common you can pick up on, what other people have. And that recently happened to me. I had somebody come over and they were in my apartment. For some reason, I just got really, really agitated and mad. And
so unlike you.
And then I felt horrible because it's like, he's a nice guy. Why did I do that? There was no need for that. But I just think there was something with him that
right.
I picked up on.
Right. And it leads to medical issues. So we have had investigations. We had that one in Blackfoot where the lady had been sick for so long. And there was no explanation. They couldn't figure it out. She was you should have seen her, coffee table was just full of pills that they just kept putting around different medications. And she was the one that had the two non-human entities in her house. Mm-hmm. And just the energy from these two things. Mm-hmm. She just was constantly ill.
Yeah, and in that case, she had so many medications that then she had to have medications to combat the medications.
Yeah.
It just started this cycle that was...
Right.
Yeah.
No good.
No good. So,
last question.
Yeah.
Is there a surefire way to say, hey, that's a demon?
There is. And now now realize I've studied this more than any mentally balanced humanoid should. But
right.
When you say the word demon to me, it is a very, very specific type of entity that acts in a very specific type of way. And a demon to me is an entity that is an ancient god or goddess that was literally demonized kind of as Christianity took over. And then that might be another subject for another day, but that's the short version. The entities that the books and the movies are made out of, the ones that make great stories, those, at this point, I just refer to as dark ones. Because honestly, I have not specifically pinpointed them, but they're not a demon.
Yeah.
As far as I define demon. But then again, if you've got a lot of religious background, if you've got a lot of religious training, especially if you're coming from any branch of Christianity, in order to fit within their teaching, their belief system, there's either two types of entities. It's either an angel or a demon. And so you go through trying to fit everything into these two categories. And the example that I use is kind of a line from the movie The Blues Brothers. When they were in that one bar, they asked the waitress, well, what kind of music do you have here? She says, oh, we have both kinds, country and Western.
Right.
So if you're going through life and that's how you define all music, it's either country or Western, that's okay to a certain point, but then, where do you put a Sousa March or a Beethoven Symphony?
Right.
If you're defining all music as country or Western, where do you put a lot of this stuff? And yet on a spiritual level, on spiritual training, that's how a lot of people go through. It's either an angel or a demon. And there's actually an entire range of things out there that we need to be there. But to know if it's a specific demon, first of all, the very first thing is a demon has to be invited. Generally, and this is as I define demon, it has to be invited almost 100% of the time by name. So you have to put a conscious, intentional effort into getting a demon's attention and bringing them in.
And I would think it would take more than one, like just sitting there on the couch and saying the name. It's a conscious effort to bring it into your life.
Conscious, intentional effort. Yeah. And a demon is not something where you can just casually mention the name, it's going to show up. It's not nearly that easy. Now, like I said, there are some entities like that. At this time, I'll just refer to them as dark ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And leave them in their own category.
Yeah.
But yeah, a demon to me is a very specific type of entity. And that's the first question I have is, did you bring something in?
Yeah.
And people do it unwittingly.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
I mean,
if
the
it's
Ouija boards
unwittingly,
and be careful.
If it's unwittingly, it's probably not a demon.
Right.
It could be a dark one.
Could be dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not a demon. Now, the secret to a Ouija board is addressing who you want to talk to.
Right. Yeah, you use it to
That's
talk
been the
to,
secret.
my mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to talk to this entity, this person, whatever.
But
and
how
that's
many
the secret to a
teenagers
Ouija
know
board.
that?
Yeah. That's also from all the stories I've heard, and I've heard a lot of stories about Ouija boards, and some people have had very positive experiences with them. Swear by them, think they're a great tool. Some have had very negative experiences with them. And that's been the one correlation that I have found. If you address who you want to communicate with, you don't have a problem.
Right.
If you leave the communication open to anything that wants to talk, that's when we get issues.
Right.
See, and that's when I get a phone call because something came.
Right.
So the secret to a Ouija board, address who you want to talk to.
Right. Or pendulum, or dowsing rods.
Yeah.
Any tool that you have.
That's a good point. If at all possible, be as specific as possible who you want to communicate with, talk to.
Well, I actually think that helps a lot. So, to everyone listening here,
Hope so.
Unless you wanted it, it's Uncle Bill.
And if I can, got one more quick story. One of my favorite stories. I got a call one day from a lady, lives here in Pocatello. I answer the phone and she goes, "Mark, I got a demon that's forming in my kitchen trying to attack me." I said, "Okay. What's it doing?" She goes, "It's standing there."
Okay.
Very well.
Tell him to take out the trash.
So yeah, so tell him to be paying some rent. What's he here? What do you want? So it's like, okay, well, if it's just standing there, it's not trying to attack you. What's it doing now? It's still just standing there. Okay. What does it want? I don't know. It's saying something. And this woman had ability. She had good ability. And I says, okay, what is it saying? She's like, well, I don't know. And I says, okay, well, just relax and listen to it and tell me exactly what it's saying. She comes out and she goes, oh, well, it's confused. Okay, why is it confused? So anyway, we kind of kept the cycle going, asking questions, getting information. Come to find out, she lived in an apartment complex here in the area, and a few years back, 15 to 20 years back, this apartment complex had a fire. And this entity standing in her kitchen actually used to live in one of the apartments and died from smoke inhalation during the fire. And since it was sleeping, it had been really confused this entire time.
What she's doing in his apartment.
Yeah. So after kind of talking her through this and asking some questions, and then, towards the end, she was asking the questions and getting everything rolling. And come to find out, they were just really confused. Yeah. And she also says something very interesting. She says, as the conversation went on, as she talked to it, it got lighter.
Oh.
And she says it's almost that it was covered with soot from the fire.
Oh, interesting.
That was starting to fall off as it was talking.
As the confusion left.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
And so then it went from, and like I said, she had some abilities and she could, and so at the end she just helped it cross over because it was just really confused. It went to sleep and whoever this person was went to sleep there and died from smoke inhalation during a fire and didn't even know there was a fire. And spent the next 20 years just trying to figure out what happened.
Interesting.
But the reason I like to tell that story is it went from having a demonic possession to, let's help this person cross over.
Right.
So a lot of this is she had enough religious teaching to think everything was a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So and she had the ability to communicate with spirits. So when she saw something in her kitchen,
yeah,
she just automatically thought
right
it was a demon. And so again, that's one of the reasons I ask questions, is to get people to think about it, to calm down a little bit, to maybe get a little more information and go through it. And that was a case where what we found out was not even close to being a demonic. But a lot of times people go to
they immediately
demon
think dark
from their teaching. Yeah.
Well, in all the damn shows.
Yeah.
Almost every TV show out there, every haunt is native, and it's not.
And there's a lot of TV series, and I still watch them still, even though I'm constantly screaming at the TV. It's not a demon. This is also why I can't go into certain movie theaters anymore.
Right.
It's fun to watch Aaron run around.
It is.
It is. The Dude and Bro Show, right? Everybody says, "Oh, you're just jealous." I'm like, no, not of that fame.
No.
No.
It's kind of like he goes in there and talks smack and then screams like a little girl when the ghost squares up. It's like, dude, you brought it on, man.
Well, I think this was a good topic. And, don't, go ahead and call us when you have a haunting and we'll talk you through it. We get a lot of calls. Not everybody wants an investigation. They just want a sounding board, and I'm here for that. Our phone number's on our website, Pocatello Paranormal Research. And we have YouTube, Facebook, website. We've got it all. So
even a podcast.
Even a podcast.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight on Speaking of Spirits. We hope you learned a little bit this evening. We hope maybe we even may have helped some of you out. These are just different things that happen when you're a paranormal investigator. Welcome to our world. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Have a good night.
Woo.